Dr. Kim Minji had not slept in 18 hours. Her eyes burned from staring at computer screens, but she could not stop working. Somewhere in the data about Valdorian armor was the key to saving humanity. She just had to find it. "Pass me the energy scanner," she said to Choi Hee-soo. Her assistant looked as tired as she felt, but neither of them complained. Outside their underground laboratory, the world was ending. They were humanity's last hope. Kim Minji held the scanner over a piece of Valdorian armor. The device beeped and showed numbers on its small screen. She had done this test 100 times, but something was different now. She was looking for something new. "The armor converts kinetic energy to power," she said, speaking her thoughts out loud. "It also converts heat energy, electrical energy, and even nuclear energy. But what about—" She stopped. An idea was forming in her mind, but it seemed impossible. "What is it?" Choi Hee-soo asked. "The armor needs something to work with," Kim Minji said slowly. "It takes energy from attacks and converts it to power for their systems. But what happens if there is no energy to convert? What happens if there is nothing at all?" Across the city, Lieutenant Colonel Song Ji-hye was moving through the empty subway tunnels beneath Seoul. She led a team of 20 soldiers, all carrying heavy packs of food and medicine for the people hiding in the deeper shelters. The tunnels were dark and quiet. The subway trains had stopped running months ago when the Valdorians came. Now the tunnels were highways for human survivors trying to stay hidden from alien sensors. "Stop," Song Ji-hye whispered to her team. She held up her hand, and all the soldiers froze. Through the tunnel walls, she could hear the deep humming sound that Valdorian armor made. A patrol was walking above them on the surface. Song Ji-hye had learned to recognize that sound. It meant death for any human caught in the open. But something was strange. The humming sound kept starting and stopping. Valdorian patrols usually moved in straight lines, never hesitating. Why were these aliens acting differently? Song Ji-hye pressed her ear to the tunnel wall. The humming stopped completely for almost a minute. Then it started again, but from a different direction. "They are confused," whispered Sergeant Park Sun-ho, one of her soldiers. "I have never seen Valdorians move like that. What is different about this area?" Song Ji-hye asked herself. She looked around the tunnel. It was empty except for old train tracks and concrete walls. No power lines, no equipment, no signs of human activity. Then she understood. "This section has been completely evacuated," she said. "No people, no machines, no electrical systems, nothing but empty space." The idea seemed crazy, but Song Ji-hye made a mental note to report it to General Park Ji-won. Maybe empty spaces confused Valdorian technology somehow. Back in her laboratory, Kim Minji was testing her impossible theory. She had built a small vacuum chamber, a box that could remove all the air from inside it. She placed a piece of Valdorian armor in the chamber and began pumping out the air. "What are you doing?" Choi Hee-soo asked. "Testing what happens when there is truly nothing for the armor to work with," Kim Minji said. "Not just no attacks, but no matter, no energy, no particles of any kind." As the air was pumped out, the piece of armor began to behave strangely. Its blue glow flickered. The energy field that surrounded it started to fade. "That's impossible," Choi Hee-soo said. "The armor should work in space. Valdorian ships operate in the vacuum between planets." "Yes, but space is not really empty," Kim Minji explained. "There are still particles, radiation, cosmic rays, gravitational fields. This vacuum chamber creates something closer to true emptiness." When all the air was gone, something amazing happened. The piece of Valdorian armor simply stopped working. The energy field disappeared. The blue glow went out. The armor became just a piece of dead metal. "By all the ancestors," Choi Hee-soo whispered. "You found it. You found their weakness." Kim Minji stared at the dead armor in the vacuum chamber. Her hands were shaking with excitement and fear. "I need to call General Park immediately, but first I need to understand why this works." She began making notes as fast as she could write. Valdorian technology requires interaction with some form of matter or energy. In a perfect vacuum, there is nothing to interact with. The armor's power systems shut down because they have nothing to convert to energy. General Park Ji-won was in the middle of a meeting with his remaining officers when Kim Min-ji's urgent radio call came through. Her voice was so excited that she was difficult to understand. "General, I found it. I found their weakness. The armor fails in a perfect vacuum." Park Ji-won felt his heart jump. "Explain quickly, Doctor. We have only 14 hours left. Their armor, their weapons, their sensors, everything depends on having something to work with. Particles, energy, matter of any kind. In a true vacuum, their technology cannot function." "But how can we create a vacuum on a battlefield?" Park Ji-won asked. "We cannot build giant vacuum chambers around their soldiers." "I am working on that," Kim Min-ji said. "Give me 6 hours. I think I can build a device that creates vacuum pockets, small spheres of perfect emptiness. If we can place these around their forces, their armor will shut down." Park Ji-won finished. "Dr. Kim, you may have just saved humanity. I am sending engineer Yoon Seokmin to help you. Use any resources you need." When the radio call ended, Park Ji-won turned to his officers. For the first time in months, he was smiling. "Song Ji-hye, you said you noticed strange behavior from Valdorians in empty areas. Tell me more." Song Ji-hye explained what she had observed in the subway tunnels. Their sensors seemed confused in areas with no equipment or people. They kept stopping and scanning the same empty spaces. "That matches Dr. Kim's discovery," Park Ji-won said. "Their technology needs something to work with. Empty spaces confuse them because there is nothing there to detect or interact with." Captain Lee Dong-hyun, who had lost so many soldiers in failed attacks, raised his hand. "General, if we can build these vacuum devices, how would we use them in battle? My men need to know how to fight with weapons that create nothing instead of destroying something." It was a good question. Park Ji-won realized that humanity would need to learn an entirely new kind of warfare, not based on hitting the enemy harder, but on removing everything around the enemy until there was nothing left for their technology to work with. "We will figure it out," he said. "Right now our scientists are working on the technology. When they succeed, we will train our soldiers to fight with emptiness as a weapon." Engineer Yoon Seokmin arrived at Kim Min-ji's laboratory 3 hours later. He was a practical man who had spent his career building things. The idea of building a device that created nothingness seemed backwards to him. "Show me what you have discovered," he said to Kim Min-ji. She demonstrated the vacuum chamber test again. Yoon Seokmin watched the Valdorian armor die when all the air was removed. His engineering mind immediately began thinking about how to make this work on a larger scale. "We need portable vacuum generators," he said. "Devices that can create spheres of emptiness around moving targets. The power requirements will be enormous." "What about using the city's electrical grid?" Kim Min-ji suggested. "We can tap into the power plants that the Valdorians have not destroyed yet." "That might work for static positions," Yoon Seokmin said. "But for mobile units, we need something smaller. What if we modify the emergency life support systems from our space stations? They are designed to create and maintain vacuum conditions." As they worked, other human scientists around the world received copies of Kim Min-ji's data. In hidden laboratories in America, Europe, Africa, and Australia, physicists and engineers began building their own versions of vacuum weapons. The clock showed 8 hours until the Valdorian deadline. Humanity was running out of time, but for the first time since the invasion began, they had hope. High above Earth, Admiral Valdros was growing impatient. His sensors showed that human activity had increased in the past few hours. Underground facilities that had been quiet were now buzzing with energy signatures. "What are the humans doing?" he asked his science officer. "Unknown, Admiral. The energy patterns are strange. They appear to be building some kind of industrial equipment, but our sensors cannot determine its purpose." "No matter," Valdros said. "Whatever they are building, our armor will protect us from it. In 8 hours, their time runs out. If they do not surrender, we burn their world." But Admiral Valdros had made the same mistake that had doomed every species his empire had conquered. He assumed that all weapons were designed to attack. He could not imagine that humanity was building weapons designed to create perfect emptiness. The race against time continued. In laboratories around the world, human scientists worked to turn their discovery into salvation. The morning sun rose over New Seoul, but Park Ji-won could not see it from his underground bunker. The thick concrete walls kept him safe from the alien ships that filled the sky above. He stood in front of a wall of screens, watching the last human soldiers fight a war they could not win. "Sir, the Western defense line is falling back again," said Captain Lee Dong-yun through the radio. His voice was tired. Park Ji-won could hear explosions in the background. "Our rockets just bounce. Off them. Nothing works." Park Ji-won closed his eyes for a moment. 3 months ago, he had been a simple commander in the Korean Defense Force. Now he led what remained of humanity's army. The aliens had come without warning. They called themselves Valdorians, and they wanted Earth for themselves. High above the planet, Admiral Kex Valdros stood on the bridge of his massive ship. The ship was called Eternal Dominion, and it was bigger than most human cities. Through the large windows, he could see Earth below. It looked small and weak from up here. "Report on the human resistance," Valdros said to his officer. "They continue to fight, Admiral, but their weapons cannot hurt us. Our quantum lattice armor protects all our forces completely." Valdros smiled. The armor was the pride of his people. It created a shimmering energy field around every Valdorian soldier and ship. Human bullets bounced off like raindrops. There, missiles exploded harmlessly against the barrier. Even their nuclear weapons only made the armor glow brighter. "How many humans are left fighting?" Valdros asked. "Perhaps 1 million soldiers in scattered groups. They hide in underground bunkers and launch small attacks." "Let them," Valdros said. "Every attack they make only makes us stronger." This was the terrible truth that Park Ji-won was beginning to understand. Deep in her laboratory beneath the ruins of Seoul University, Dr. Kim Minji studied pieces of Valdorian armor that her soldiers had found. She was a young physicist who had spent her life studying energy and matter. Now she worked by candlelight, trying to save her species. "The armor does not just block attacks," she explained to her assistant, Choi Hee-soo. "Look at these readings. When we hit it with energy, the armor absorbs that energy and converts it to power." Choi Hee-soo looked at the numbers on the small computer screen. "You mean our attacks make them stronger?" "Yes. Their weapons, their shields, their communication systems, everything gets more powerful when we fight them. We are feeding energy to our enemies." Above ground, Captain Lee Dong-hyun led 50 soldiers through the empty streets of Seoul. The buildings around them were broken and burned. No people lived here anymore. The civilians had all been moved to the deep shelters. There, Lee Dong-yun pointed to a group of Valdorian soldiers walking down the main street. They moved slowly, not worried about human attacks. Their armor glowed, with a soft blue light. "Take positions," Lee Dong-yun whispered to his men. "Remember, aim for the gaps in their armor." But there were no gaps. The Valdorian armor covered every part of their bodies. It was not metal or fabric. It was pure energy, shaped into a protective shell. The human soldiers opened fire. Bullets and energy blasts hit the Valdorians from all directions. The aliens did not even try to take cover. They stood in the street as the weapons struck them. Their armor flashed brighter with each hit. "Our turn," said one of the Valdorians. His voice was calm, almost bored. The aliens raised their weapons and fired back. Red beams of energy cut through the air. Human soldiers screamed and fell. Lee Dong-hyun watched 3 of his men die in seconds. "Fall back! Fall back!" he shouted. The humans ran through the empty buildings, but the Valdorians did not chase them. They had made their point. They were untouchable. In his bunker, Park Ji-won received the report of another failed attack. He had lost count of how many soldiers had died trying to find some weakness in Valdorian armor. Every day brought news of more defeats, more retreats, more death. "General Park," said Lieutenant Colonel Song Ji-hee as she entered the command room. She was in charge of moving civilians to safety. "We have evacuated another 1,000 people from the outer districts, but the Valdorians are expanding their search pattern. Soon there will be nowhere left to hide." Park Ji-won nodded. He looked at the map on his desk. Red marks showed where Valdorian forces had taken control. The red covered most of the world now. Only a few green spots remained, showing where humans still fought. How long can we hold? He asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3 if we are lucky, Song Jie said. But General, I have noticed something strange. In areas where we have removed all equipment and people, the Valdorian sensors seem to work differently. They spend more time scanning empty buildings than ones with people inside. Before Park Ji-won could ask what she meant, an alarm rang through the bunker. All the screens in the command room switched to the same image. Admiral Valdros appeared, on every monitor. He sat in a chair that looked like a throne made of the same energy as Valdorian armor. Humans of Earth, Valdros began. His voice was cold and formal. You have fought bravely but uselessly. Our armor makes us invincible. Your weapons only feed our power. Every attack you make proves that resistance is pointless. Park Ji-won felt his hands form fists. Around the bunker, other soldiers and officers watched in silence. I will give you one final chance, Valdros continued. You have 24 hours to surrender completely. Lay down all weapons, stop all resistance, submit to Valdorian rule, and some of you may live as servants to our empire. The admiral leaned forward in his throne. If you refuse, if even one human continues to fight after tomorrow's sunrise, we will end your species. Our fleet carries weapons that can burn the atmosphere from your planet. 24 hours. Choose wisely. The screens went black. For a long moment, nobody spoke in the bunker. Then Park Ji-won broke the silence. Get me Dr. Kim Min-ji on the radio, he said, and contact all remaining military leaders. We have 24 hours to find a miracle. In her underground laboratory, Kim Min-ji heard the same message. She looked at the pieces of Valdorian armor on her workbench. Somewhere in this technology was an answer. There had to be. Hyesu, she said to her assistant, cancel all sleep. We work through the night. There must be something we have missed. High, above, Admiral Valdros returned to studying tactical displays of Earth. His forces controlled 90% of the planet's surface. The remaining humans were trapped in underground bunkers and caves. Tomorrow, one way or another, this war would end. Sir, said his communications officer, should we prepare the atmosphere-burning weapons? Yes, Valdros said. If the humans choose death over surrender, we will give them what they want. But I believe they will see reason. No species has ever resisted us once they understood the power of our armor. He was wrong, but Admiral Valdros would not learn this until it was too late. In bunkers and laboratories around the world, humans worked through the night, searching for the one thing no alien species had ever found: a way to turn invincible armor into a weakness. The clock was ticking. 24 hours to save humanity, or watch their world burn. General Park Ji-won stood in the main laboratory, watching teams of engineers work frantically on strange-looking devices. The machines did not look like weapons. They looked more like the equipment used to build computer chips or space stations. But if Dr. Kim Min-ji was right, these devices would save humanity. How many do we have working? He asked engineer Yoon Seokmin. 12 portable units ready for field testing, Yoon Seokmin replied. Each one can create a sphere of perfect vacuum, about 5 meters across. But General, we have never tested these against actual Valdorian soldiers. We only know they work on pieces of armor in the laboratory. We will find out soon, Park Ji-won said. Through the bunker's communication system, he could hear reports from around the world. Human scientists in every remaining facility were building similar devices. Some worked, some failed, but progress was being made. Captain Lee Dong-yun studied the portable vacuum generator that his team would test. It was about the size of a large backpack and required 2 soldiers to carry it. Strange tubes and wires connected to a device that looked like a satellite dish. So we point this at the enemy and it creates empty space around them? He asked Kim Min-ji. Yes, but you must understand, this is not like a normal weapon, she explained. You are not shooting something at them. You are removing everything around them. The timing must be perfect. Lee Dong-hyun nodded, but he looked confused. His soldiers had trained their whole lives to attack enemies with bullets, missiles, and energy weapons. Now they had to learn to fight by creating nothingness. How long does the vacuum last? Asked Sergeant Park Sun-ho. About 30 seconds for each activation, Kim Minji said. Then the device needs 1 minute to recharge. You will have to coordinate carefully with other teams. 4 hours remained until the Valdorian deadline. On the surface, Sub-Commander Rex Thakos was leading a large force of Valdorian soldiers toward the Seoul defense perimeter. His mission was to eliminate the last organized human resistance in this sector. "Sir, our sensors detect increased activity in the underground bunkers," reported one of his officers. "The humans appear to be preparing some kind of final attack." Rex Thakos smiled inside his armor. He had fought in dozens of planetary conquests. Every species tried one last desperate assault before surrendering. It never worked. "Let them come," he said. "Their attacks will only charge our systems for the final bombardment." The Valdorians moved in perfect formation across the empty city. Their blue armor gleamed in the afternoon sunlight. Rex Thakos counted 200 soldiers in his force plus 6 heavy combat vehicles. More than enough to crush any human resistance. Underground, Lieutenant Colonel Song Ji-hye was preparing her own mission. She had volunteered to test a larger version of the vacuum generator, one that required a truck to transport, but could create much bigger empty zones. "The theory is simple," explained Dr. Park Sun-ho, who had joined Kim Minji's research team. "We create overlapping vacuum fields that isolate different groups of enemies. They will not be able to communicate or coordinate." "What happens to the Valdorians when they are trapped in vacuum?" Song Ji-hye asked. "They will not be hurt," Park Sun-ho said. "But their armor will stop working, their weapons will shut down, their communication systems will fail. They will be helpless until the vacuum field collapses." Song Ji-hye understood. It was like capturing the enemy instead of killing them, but capturing them using emptiness as a prison. Commander Han Sora was testing a different approach. As a former astronaut, she understood vacuum conditions better than most people. Her team was working on a way to use the vacuum generators in space to cut off Valdorian ships from their ground forces. "The challenge is power," she explained to her engineers. "In space, we cannot tap into the electrical grid. We need portable power sources that can create and maintain large vacuum fields." "What about using the same fusion reactors that power our spaceships?" suggested one engineer. "That might work," Han Sora said. "But we need to test it quickly. Time is running out." On the Valdorian flagship, Admiral Valdros was receiving reports from his ground commanders. The humans were still moving around in their bunkers, but they showed no signs of preparing to surrender. "Admiral, should we begin targeting their major cities with the atmosphere burners?" asked his weapons officer. "Not yet," Valdros said. "I want to give them the full 24 hours. When they finally realize that resistance is impossible, their surrender will be complete. Broken spirits make better slaves than dead heroes." But Valdros was wrong about human spirits. In laboratories and bunkers around the world, scientists and soldiers were not preparing to surrender. They were preparing to fight in a way that no species had ever tried before. With 3 hours left, the first field test began. Captain Lee Dong-hyun led his team through the subway tunnels toward a Valdorian patrol position. 2 soldiers carried the portable vacuum generator while others provided security. "Remember," Lee Dong-hyun whispered into his radio, "we are not trying to destroy the enemy. We are trying to make them irrelevant." The team reached a maintenance tunnel that led to the surface. Through a small opening, they could see 5 Valdorian soldiers standing guard at an intersection. The aliens stood perfectly still, their sensors sweeping the area for human activity. "Target acquired," whispered the soldier operating the vacuum generator. "Ready to create void field. Do it," Lee Dong-hyun ordered. The device hummed quietly for 3 seconds. Then something incredible happened. A sphere of absolutely nothing appeared around the 5 Valdorian soldiers. It was not visible to the eye, but the effects were immediate. The blue glow of Valdorian armor flickered and died. The aliens stumbled, their sensors suddenly blind. They tried to communicate with each other, but their radio systems had shut down. For 30 seconds, they floated helplessly in perfect vacuum, unable to interact with anything around them. When the field collapsed, The Valdorian soldiers fell to the ground, their armor completely powerless. They were alive but helpless, like children who had lost their toys. "It works," Lee Dong-hyun whispered into his radio. "The vacuum generator works. Their armor is completely shut down." The message was relayed instantly to command bunkers around the world. Humanity had found a weapon that could neutralize Valdorian forces without destroying them. But the test also revealed problems. The vacuum generator was slow to recharge, and it took precise timing to use effectively. The human soldiers would need to coordinate perfectly to use these weapons in a real battle. General Park Ji-won received the test results with mixed feelings. The technology worked, but his forces had less than 3 hours to prepare for the largest battle in human history. "How many vacuum generators do we have ready?" he asked. 63 portable units, 12 truck-mounted systems, and 1 large installation here in Seoul, reported Yoon Seokman. Teams around the world have another 100 units of various sizes. "Will it be enough?" "We will find out, General." On the surface, Sub-Commander Rex Thakos noticed that one of his patrol units had stopped reporting. This was unusual but not alarming. Sometimes communication systems had minor failures. "Continue the advance," he ordered his forces. "We will investigate the communication problem later." He did not know that his soldiers were sitting on the ground, their armor dead, staring at each other in confusion and fear. For the first time in Valdorian history, their perfect armor had failed them completely. Dr. Kim Min-ji was making final adjustments to the largest vacuum generator, the one built into the Seoul defense perimeter. This device could create a vacuum field large enough to cover several city blocks, but it required enormous amounts of power. "We can maintain the field for 5 minutes maximum," she told General Park. "After that, the city's power grid will be completely drained." 5 minutes. "To defeat an enemy that has conquered half the galaxy," Park Ji-won said. "It will have to be enough." As the final hour approached, human forces around the world prepared for a battle unlike any in history. They would not be shooting at their enemies. Instead, they would be removing the universe around their enemies, creating pockets of nothingness, where Valdorian technology simply could not function. The irony was not lost on the human commanders. For months they had tried to find bigger weapons, more powerful explosives, better ways to attack Valdorian armor. The answer had been the opposite. The most powerful weapon was no weapon at all, just empty space. Admiral Valdros looked at the chronometer on his command bridge. 1 hour until the human deadline expired. Soon this annoying little war would be over, and Earth would become another conquered world in the Valdorian Empire. He had no idea that humanity was about to teach his species a lesson about the power of nothing. The sun was rising over Seoul when Sub-Commander Rex Thakos led his forces toward the human defense lines. His armor gleamed in the morning light, and he felt confident about the easy victory ahead. 200 Valdorian soldiers marched behind him, their weapons charged and ready. "Sir, we still cannot contact Patrol Unit 7, reported his communications officer. "Probably equipment failure," Rex Thakos said. "We will find them after we eliminate the remaining humans." He did not know that Patrol Unit 7 was sitting in an empty building, their armor completely dead, waiting for rescue that would never come. In the underground command center, General Park Ji-won watched his screens as Valdorian forces approached from 3 directions. Red dots showed enemy positions moving closer to the green dots that represented human defensive positions. "All units, this is General Park," he spoke into his radio. "Operation Empty Space begins now. Remember, we are not trying to kill the enemy. We are making them irrelevant." Captain Lee Dong-hyun crouched in a ruined building with his team. They had practiced with the vacuum generator for hours, but this would be their first real battle. 2 soldiers carried the heavy device while others watched for enemy movement. "Target group approaching from the east," whispered Sergeant Park Sun-ho. 12 Valdorians, moving in formation. Lee Dong-hyun could see them through the broken window. The alien soldiers walked confidently down the empty street, their blue armor shimmering with power. They had no idea that death was not coming for them. Something much worse was approaching. "Wait for my signal," Lee Dong-hyun said. "We need them closer together." The Valdorian soldiers reached the intersection below. They stopped to scan the buildings around them, looking for signs of human activity. It was the perfect moment. Now, Lee Donghyun ordered. The vacuum generator activated. A sphere of perfect emptiness appeared around the Valdorian soldiers. From the outside, nothing seemed to change, but inside the sphere, reality had been altered. The Valdorians' armor immediately began to fail. The blue energy field that protected them flickered and died. Their weapons shut down. Their communication systems went silent. For 30 seconds, they existed in a pocket of nothingness where their advanced technology could not function. When the vacuum field collapsed, 12 Valdorian soldiers fell to their knees, their armor completely powerless. They looked around, in confusion and fear, no longer the invincible warriors they had been moments before. Team 2, your turn. Lee Donghyun spoke into his radio. 3 blocks away, Lieutenant Colonel Song Ji-hye was operating one of the truck-mounted vacuum generators. Her target was a group of Valdorian vehicles, heavy combat machines that had been destroying human positions for months. Activating large field generator, she announced. All teams clear the area. The truck-mounted device was much more powerful than the portable units. When it activated, a vacuum sphere 50 meters across appeared around the Valdorian vehicles. The effect was dramatic. The combat vehicles, which had seemed indestructible, suddenly stopped working. Their energy shields collapsed. Their weapons systems shut down. The Valdorians inside found themselves trapped in dead machines, unable to see or communicate with the outside world. Direct hit, Song Ji-hye reported. 6 enemy vehicles neutralized. They are not destroyed, just turned off. Sub-Commander Rex Thakos was beginning to realize that something was very wrong. Half of his force had stopped reporting. The humans were not firing normal weapons at his soldiers, but somehow his troops were being eliminated anyway. What is happening? He demanded from his remaining officers. How are the humans defeating our armor? Unknown, sir. Our sensors show strange energy patterns around the areas where our forces have gone silent. But there are no explosions, no weapon signatures. Rex, Thakos felt fear creeping into his thoughts. In 200 years of conquest, no enemy had ever found a way to neutralize Valdorian armor. It was supposed to be impossible. From orbit, Admiral Valdros was watching the battle through his ship's sensors. The displays showed something that made no sense. Human forces were creating areas of nothing. Empty spaces where Valdorian soldiers simply stopped functioning. What are those energy patterns? He asked his science officer. We are not certain, Admiral. They appear to be some kind of vacuum, field generation, but that should not affect our armor. Our ships operate in the vacuum of space. Then why are our ground forces failing? Valdros demanded. The science officer had no answer. Valdorian technology had never encountered anything like this before. In the Seoul Command Center, Dr. Kim Min-ji was monitoring the performance of all the vacuum generators. The portable units were working well, but the power requirements were enormous. The city's electrical grid was being drained faster than expected. General Park, she called out, we are using power faster than calculated. The large generators can only operate for 3 more minutes before we lose all electricity. Then we use every second, Park Ji-won replied. All units, maximum effort. Now, this is our only chance. Around the world, similar battles were taking place. In London, human forces used vacuum generators to isolate Valdorian troops in the ruins of Big Ben. In New York, the remaining military created empty zones in Central Park, trapping alien soldiers in pockets of nothingness. Commander Han Sora was leading the space-based operation. Her team had modified a small spacecraft with experimental vacuum generators, and they were approaching the Valdorian supply ships that orbited Earth. Target acquired, she reported to ground control. 1 Valdorian transport ship carrying reinforcements for the ground assault. Understood. You are authorized to test the space-based vacuum system. Han Sora activated her modified generators. A massive sphere of emptiness appeared around the Valdorian transport ship. Inside the sphere, the ship's energy systems began to fail. Its communication array went dark. Its weapons powered down. It works in space too, Han Sora reported. The transport ship is completely disabled. It is floating dead in orbit. The message was relayed to Admiral Valdros, who was now watching his conquest of Earth fall apart in ways he could not understand. Ship after ship, ground unit after ground unit, his forces were being neutralized by weapons that created nothing. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, "We have lost contact with 60% of our ground forces and 30% of our orbital support ships. The humans appear to be using some form of vacuum-based technology." Valdros felt something he had not experienced in decades, genuine fear. How is this possible? Our armor is designed to operate in any environment. Sir, our armor interacts with matter and energy to generate power. If there is truly nothing to interact with, the armor fails, Valdros finished. Order all remaining forces to retreat immediately. We need to understand this human weapon before we lose everything. But the retreat order came too late for many Valdorian units. Sub-Commander Rex Thakos found himself surrounded by spheres of nothingness, his forces cut off from each other and from their command structure. "Fall back," he ordered over his radio, but the vacuum fields were interfering with communications. His soldiers could not hear him, and he could not coordinate any organized withdrawal. In the Seoul defense perimeter, General Park Ji-won was preparing to activate the largest vacuum generator ever built. This device would create an empty zone, large enough to cover the entire center of the city, but it would drain all remaining power from the electrical grid. "All human forces withdraw to minimum safe distance," he ordered. "We are activating the citywide vacuum field in 60 seconds. Dr. Kim Minji stood beside the massive generator, her hand on the activation switch. 3 months ago, she had been a university professor studying theoretical physics. Now she held the power to save humanity in her hands. "Activating in 10 seconds, she announced. 9, 8, 7. Sub-Commander Rex Thakos saw the lights in the human city beginning to dim as power was diverted to something massive. He realized that the humans were preparing their largest attack yet. "All units, emergency retreat," he shouted. "Get out of the city now." But it was too late. 3, 2, 1. Activating. Kim Minji pressed the switch. Every light in Seoul went out as all the city's power flowed into the vacuum generator. A sphere of absolute nothingness 5 kilometers across appeared over the city center. Every Valdorian soldier and vehicle caught inside the sphere found their technology completely dead. Hundreds of alien warriors, who had seemed invincible just hours before, now sat helplessly in the dark, their armor as useful as decoration. The vacuum field lasted for exactly 5 minutes, just as Kim Minji had calculated. When it finally collapsed, the center of Seoul contained 300 Valdorian soldiers whose armor would never work again. General Park Ji-won looked at his tactical displays. For the first time since the invasion began, there were no red dots showing active Valdorian forces in his sector. The aliens had not been destroyed. They had been made irrelevant. "All units report," he said into his radio. "What is the status of enemy forces?" The reports came back from around the world. London, Paris, New York, Tokyo, in every major city, human forces had successfully neutralized Valdorian troops using vacuum technology. The aliens were alive but powerless, their advanced armor reduced to useless metal. Admiral Valdros stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at displays that showed impossible things. Red warning lights flashed across every screen. His invasion fleet, which had conquered dozens of worlds, was being defeated by empty spaces. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we have lost all contact with ground forces on Earth. Orbital support ships are going dark one by one. The human vacuum weapons appear to be spreading into space." Valdros felt something his species had not experienced in centuries: complete confusion about how to fight an enemy. "How many ships do we still have operational?" 40% of the fleet, sir. But that number is dropping as human spacecraft create more vacuum fields around our positions. Commander Han Sora was leading the space-based assault from her modified ship. Working with teams from other nations, she had turned humanity's small space fleet into a force that could challenge Valdorian vessels using nothing but empty space. Target the command ship's communication array, she ordered her crew. If we can isolate their admiral from his fleet, they cannot coordinate any response. Her ship moved closer to the massive Valdorian flagship. The enemy vessel was 10 times larger than her small craft. But size meant nothing when your weapons could create zones of nothingness around any target. Activating vacuum field around their primary communication system, reported her weapons. Officer Dot, and a sphere of perfect emptiness appeared around the flagship's communication array. Immediately, the massive Valdorian ship became deaf and mute, unable to send or receive messages from its fleet. On Earth, General Park Ji-won was coordinating the final phases of Operation Empty Space. Human forces around the world had successfully neutralized most Valdorian ground troops, but the job was not finished yet. Status report from all sectors, he requested. Captain Lee Dong-yun responded first. Seoul sector secure. We have approximately 400 disabled Valdorian soldiers in custody. Their armor is completely non-functional, but the aliens themselves are unharmed. Similar reports came from other cities. London had captured 300 Valdorians. New York reported 500. In total, human forces had neutralized over 3,000 alien soldiers without killing a single one. Lieutenant Colonel Song Ji-hee was now leading what humans were calling the Empty Space Division, soldiers trained to fight using vacuum weapons. She was studying the captured Valdorian equipment, trying to understand how completely the technology had been disabled. The armor is not damaged, she reported to General Park. It is just turned off like a computer that has been unplugged. If they could find a way to restart their systems, the armor might work again. This was important information. The vacuum weapons had neutralized Valdorian forces, but the effect might not be permanent. Human scientists would need to find a way to keep the alien technology disabled. Dr. Kim Min-ji was already working on this problem. In her laboratory, she studied pieces of Valdorian armor that had been exposed to vacuum fields. Under her microscope, she could see that the technology's basic structure was unchanged. The vacuum does not destroy their systems, she explained to engineer Yoon Seokmin. It simply removes everything that the systems need to function. But if we could create permanent vacuum pockets around their technology. Portable vacuum chambers, Yoon Seokmin said, understanding her idea. Small devices that maintain empty space around pieces of their equipment. The armor would stay dead as long as it remained in vacuum. Sub-Commander Rex Thakos sat in an empty building in Seoul, surrounded by his powerless soldiers. For the first time in his military career, he felt helpless. His armor was dead weight, his weapons were useless decorations, and his communication system could not even tell him what was happening to the rest of the fleet. A human soldier appeared in the doorway. Rex Thakos expected to be shot, but instead, the human just looked at him with curiosity. "Can you understand me?" the human asked in simple words. Rex Thakos nodded. His translator still worked even though nothing else did. "My commander wants to talk with you," the human said. "Will you come peacefully?" Rex Thakos looked around at his soldiers. They were all in the same situation, alive but completely powerless. He had no choice but to cooperate. General Park Ji-won met with Rex Thakos in a room deep beneath Seoul. The Valdorian sub-commander looked strange without his glowing armor. He seemed smaller, more fragile than Park had expected. "I want to understand something," Park Ji-won said. "Your people have conquered many worlds. How do other species usually surrender to you?" Rex Thakos was silent for a moment. Then he said, "They fight until they realize our armor makes us invincible. Then they give up because continued resistance is pointless. But we found a way to make your armor irrelevant," Park said. "What happens now?" "I do not know," Rex Thakos admitted. "This has never happened before." High above Earth, Admiral Valdros faced the same problem. His fleet had been designed to fight enemies who used traditional weapons, missiles, energy beams, kinetic projectiles. Everything the Valdorians encountered could be converted into power for their systems. But vacuum weapons gave them nothing to work with. The human strategy was not to attack Valdorian technology, but to remove the universe around it, leaving it with nothing to interact with. "Admiral," his science officer reported. I have been analyzing the human vacuum weapons. They create zones of space that contain absolutely nothing. No matter, no energy, no particles of any kind. Our technology requires interaction with something to function. So we are defeated by nothingness, Valdros said. How do we fight an enemy that attacks us with empty space? The science officer had no answer. Valdorian military science had no tactics for dealing with weapons that created absolute vacuum around their targets. Commander Han Sora was preparing for the final phase of the space battle. Her fleet of modified human ships had successfully isolated most of the Valdorian vessels, but the alien flagship was still trying to escape toward the edge of the solar system. All ships coordinate your vacuum generators, she ordered. We need to create a field large enough to cover their entire command ship. It was an ambitious plan. The Valdorian flagship was enormous, and creating a vacuum field around the entire vessel would require more power than any single human ship could generate. But working together, the human fleet might be able to do it. Activating synchronized vacuum generation in 3, 2, 1. Now. Every human ship in the fleet activated its vacuum generators at the same moment. The combined effect created a massive sphere of emptiness that surrounded the Valdorian flagship completely. Inside the sphere, Admiral Valdros watched his ship's systems shut down one by one. Life support failed, weapons powered down, even the lights went out. His mighty flagship became a dead hulk floating in space. Admiral, his communications officer said in the darkness, all systems are offline. We are completely helpless. Valdros sat in his command chair, thinking about the implications of this defeat. His species had built an empire based on the belief that superior armor and weapons always led to victory. The humans had proven that sometimes the most powerful response was to create perfect emptiness. On Earth, Dr. Kim Minji was beginning to explore peaceful applications of vacuum technology. If humans could create perfect empty spaces, they could revolutionize manufacturing, space travel, and scientific research. Imagine, she said to General Park Ji-won, vacuum chambers that could preserve food indefinitely, manufacturing processes that take place in perfect emptiness, creating materials impossible to make in normal conditions, space propulsion systems based on vacuum manipulation. General Park nodded, but his mind was on more immediate concerns. What about the Valdorian prisoners? We have thousands of them, and their technology is only temporarily disabled. I am working on permanent solutions, Kim Minji said. Devices that will keep their armor in perpetual vacuum, making it impossible for them to restart their systems. The war was ending, but not through destruction. Instead, humanity had won by making their enemies irrelevant. The Valdorians were not dead. They were simply powerless, their advanced technology reduced to useless decoration. A week later, Admiral Valdros sat across from General Park Ji-won in a meeting room aboard the human space station. The Valdorian admiral looked tired and confused. His empire had been built on the assumption that technological superiority always led to victory. I must ask, Valdros said, how did your species develop such powerful weapons? What technology allowed you to create perfect vacuum in combat conditions? Park Ji-won smiled. We did not develop weapons, Admiral. We learned to work with emptiness. Your strength comes from having something to interact with. Matter, energy, particles. Our strength comes from being comfortable with nothing at all. Valdros did not understand. But how is nothingness a source of power? Think about space travel, Park explained. Humans learned to live and work in vacuum long before your invasion. We built space stations, walked in empty space, created chambers of perfect nothingness for scientific research. We were already comfortable with emptiness. You mean, this was not a weapon you developed to fight us? The vacuum generators were new, Park admitted. But the understanding of emptiness, the comfort with nothingness, that has been part of human nature for centuries.